America, heck yeah. Welcome to one of the most recognizable vehicles on the planet, the AM General Hummer H1. They're not fast, they're not efficient. They are kind of like a blimp. They take up a lot of space but only hold a few people. But there's a reason for that, and I'm going to explain all of it in this video. But first, as always, the history. This is a wagon version. Most of the civilian trucks sold were either wagons, four-door short bed pickup trucks, or soft top convertibles. The military also had a two-door pickup version and some other configurations. The Hummer journey actually started in 1983 when AM General won the contract to build a new light truck for the US military. See, up until that point, the US military basically used two types of tired vehicle. They were either the large, slow troop transport trucks that we've seen in movies and whatnot, or if you're in the service, thank you for your service, you've seen them there too, and Willys Jeeps, which were developed for World War II, but were used all the way through Vietnam and the Korean War. Now, the Jeep has an amazing story. It was developed for World War II in just 75 days, and they went on to build over 600,000 of them. The Willys Jeep was so important and helpful that General George Marshall, who was the Chief of Staff of the US Army during World War II, called the Jeep, quote, America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. But the Jeep has some downsides. Weather and fast-moving pieces of lead kind of ruin open-air motoring. The Army wanted something that could carry more stuff, more people, and just felt safer and protected the soldiers better than the Jeep did. So the US military wanted a new vehicle, but their requirements were quite challenging. It had to be able to go up a 60% incline, traverse a 40-degree slope, go through 2.5 feet of water. It had to be stronger and larger than the Jeep, but also agile enough for quick missions with a small amount of troops. 3 companies submitted prototypes, and after 600,000 miles of testing in sand and snow, AM General won the contract to build the high mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicle, hence the name Humvee. The Humvee went into service in the 80s, but it really had its breakout role in the Persian Gulf of the 90s. I'm not trying to make light of that conflict, but that war was heavily televised on the news, and a lot of the footage and photos showcased the Humvee. And for some reason, a bunch of people saw them driving around in the desert and thought, well, I need to have one of those to go to work. How do I get one? So AM General, in an effort to amortize costs and make some more money, thought, all right, well, we can sell these to the public. So in 1992, Arnold Schwarzenegger became the first civilian to own a Hummer, and in 1993, they went on sale to the general public. And these civilian models were built on the same production line as the military trucks. They were built side by side. The only difference was these got to go to a different building, like a finishing school, where they got paint and leather interiors. Do they do that with other military vehicles? Like, do they take an F-15 and then put Alcantara in it and sell it to Tom Cruise? Who's the singer of fighter jets? And if nobody's doing that, how do I do that? 1,374 Hummers were built for civilian use in 1996. This one is obviously finished in black and tan, which I think looks pretty damn awesome, actually. The roof and the hood have been repainted. You might see slight differences in the shade of tan on the car, and that's because some of the panels are made of aluminum and some of them are made of steel. The doors were not, and even the doors and the body are different. The doors are steel, the body's aluminum. This one has 109,000 miles on it. The current owner bought it with 104 and put 5,000 miles on it, doing a bunch of off-roading and taking it around town and stuff like that. He said nothing turns heads like this. And I have to say, when I saw this come through in the email, I said, all right, it's a Hummer. I think buying stuff like this for civilian use is kind of silly for most people. But then once you see it, the number of movies I watched in the 90s that just showed me this truck and showed it crashing through walls. I mean, The Rock, Broken Arrow. It was just such a popular vehicle in popular culture. Rappers had them, actors had them. They just look tough because they are tough. We know what they could do and what they did for this country. And as I said before, a bunch of people thought, if it's good enough for people going to the Persian Gulf to fight a war, then it's good enough for me to drive to set. Now I say that, but I'm also someone who really likes sports cars and supercars, and we don't need race cars for the street, but they're fun because things are fun. So let people have the fun they want to have. This one also has some extra goodies. It has 17-inch wheels, a tow hitch, this brush guard, the roof basket, a taller snorkel that has a fan in the top to blow sand out of it. It also has a dual oil filter setup that's even better at filtering out impurities in sand and dirt. It has an upgraded limited slip differential in the back and a couple of things inside that I'll show you in a second. The current owner also has a huge amount of spare parts. They're not on site today, but if you want to see photos of those, a list of them, or even more information about this Hummer H1, click the link below to go to Cars and Bids. Like any discussion about Shaquille O'Neal, you can't talk about the Hummer H1 without someone bringing up the size. Oh, it's so wide. Oh, it won't fit anywhere. Where do you park it? What an oddball. What a unique time in cars. Or is it? You see, the Hummer H1 might not be so unique in its size after all. I have the data right here. Incredibly, the Bronco Raptor has a wider track than the Hummer H1. The Bronco Raptor is also longer and taller than the Hummer. See, it's the body width that tricks us. In the Hummer, the body panels go all the way out to the wheels, whereas the Raptor and a lot of other cars today, the passenger compartment is this big, and then the doors flare out a little bit, and then the fenders flare out even more. It's visual trickery. Don't get me wrong, Ford's Horse Lizard is an amazing machine. Its approach angle is an impressive 47 degrees. That's adorable because the Hummer's is 72 degrees. Amazing. I mean, the front tires are almost in front of the headlights. It's like someone with a giant underbite says, oh yes, oh, your Bronco Raptor can go up something that's 47 degrees. That's very cute. I remember when I did that when I was 5 years old, and then I became a more polished individual, and now I can go up something at 72 degrees. Why did I make it British? These are made in Indiana. The Hummer wagon is actually about the same length as a new BMW M2. A Chevy Silverado 2500 HD is actually 5.5 feet longer. I mean, this thing's a little bit wider. There are plenty of cars on the road today that are shockingly close to the footprint of the gigantic Hummer H1. As I said, the wheels are aftermarket. They're 17 inches, and I think they look pretty damn awesome. But I'm more interested in what's behind the tires and what's behind all of you. The Hummer is famous for its central tire inflation system. It is such a cool feature, and I think it's actually one of the only luxurious things this truck has, because I haven't seen it on a G-Wagon or other cars. Maybe it's out there. Don't yell at me in the comments. Kindly correct me in the comments. That's the way to have discourse. Tire inflation system is very cool because it allows you to deflate or inflate the tires while moving. When you're off-roading, if you deflate your tires, it widens out the footprint, and then you have fewer pounds per square inch of tire. It improves traction. It allows you to float over sand and even snow if you can air down low enough and you have the right tire setup. It is a huge advantage. It also smooths out the ride if you're on a really bumpy, rutted road. It's awesome. Deflating the tires is a pain in the butt. You have to get out and attach something to the valve stem and either watch it go down with a gauge, or you have things you can set and they automatically deflate to a certain PSI. But you have to do it to all four wheels. And then when you want to inflate them, you have to go to each tire, plug in your handy dandy battery or cigarette lighter or coal-powered tire inflation system and pump up the tire to whatever PSI and then do it again and again and again. I've done it. It's time consuming. I've watched professionals do it. It's time consuming. To be able to do it on the fly is very cool. These trucks are known for having problems with that system. It's a pretty complicated thing, but the owner has showed me and said that his is working fine. He's used it a lot and has been very handy when he has gone off-roading. Very cool stuff. Another really cool piece of tech on these are the portal axles. These are so awesome, and you'll find them on Unimogs, 4x4 squared Mercedes G-Wagons, and the altitude cars that Porsche built that just set the record for going to the highest altitude a car's ever driven to, around 22,000 feet. They're a set of gears where the hub normally is that allow the drive shaft to actually sit above the center of the wheel. Normally in a 4x4 vehicle, your axle is basically right here. Well, in this truck, it's more like here. And the way that works is the series of gears transfers that power down to the hub. That also means you can't have disc brakes right behind the wheel. They're inboard like you'd find on a monster truck or a Jaguar E-Type, very similar vehicles. These portal axles are most important because they help this achieve the incredible 16 inches of ground clearance it has. It also allowed AM General to shove the drivetrain up into the body. I mean that honestly. You'll see when we go inside that it has these picnic table sized covers inside. These center consoles are so big you could host a poker game. That's because that's where the transmission and the drivetrain are. When you look under this truck, it's basically flat. It's like a race car in that way. So instead of having a huge drive shaft going to a huge differential, all that stuff is hidden up in the body, and you can drive over a 15.9-inch rock if you need to. It's really cool. The interior is a bit tighter than I was expecting, although the passenger really has it rough because they have the giant wall on the left side and the air conditioning blower is actually at their feet, so they have no shoulder room or leg room. The driver's seat isn't actually that terrible. I have tons of shoulder room over here, but it is a funny place. It's very, very clear that this was a military truck first. This is not a luxury off-roader. I don't care how much it costs or it used to cost. I don't care what they tell you. It's pretty simple in here. And it has some really funny quirks and features. The seats got recovered in vinyl. They're nice and soft and comfortable. They're not the most adjustable things in the world, but where it gets really funny is when you go to the buttons. One, the button panel wiggles a little bit when you press on different things. You just have the simplest, cheapest defense contractor controls right here. Lights, panel lights, all that kind of stuff. But one of the weird things is that the horn used to be the end of the blinker stock. You'd push that in to honk. But one of the previous owners changed that because he was tired of, pressing on something so fragile. And he added a giant red button that looks like it would be for an ejector seat or self-destruct. I feel like this tells me how often and hard that person hit the horn. Like they probably broke 15 of these before they went, you know what, just give me a button that you can smash to stop an emergency nuclear meltdown. The speedometer goes to 100, which is very optimistic, but the top speed of these is 83 miles per hour technically, and the owner told me that this one's really not meant to go over 65 for a sustained amount of time because the portal axles will heat up too much and then start to leak. Got your basic stuff, your battery, your oil, and you've got your fuel gauge, which you're going to want to pay attention to because this gets less than 11 miles per gallon. It is a turbodiesel, and it has a 40-gallon total fuel capacity between two fuel tanks. It's not the most efficient thing in the world. Apparently, it's still better than the first engine, which got like 4 miles per gallon. One thing I love is this tilt gauge because it is so analog. It's just a step above hanging a piece of string with a weight. It's actually really useful, and it won't ever break. It's just a bit of fluid with a ball bearing in the bottom, and it has markings from 0 degrees to 45 degrees. The Hummer needed to be able to traverse a 40-degree slope without tipping over. But this person has put some marks at around the 27-degree mark. So I think that's where they felt maybe uncomfortable or like they were getting close to the limit. This also might have slightly taller wheels and tires than the original one. Plus it has the roof rack that adds some weight. So it's possible that this can't quite go 40 degrees before it tips over. The stereo in here is very funny. The current owner installed this Clarion stereo and the speakers were already here. They're all in all the corners. But if you choose to use the 7-inch widescreen, you then block your air conditioning vents. That actually doesn't matter because the air conditioning blower was uninstalled by a previous owner, although the current owner has it in a box. What's under this giant box, you're wondering? Nothing. But that is where you would place the passenger air conditioning system. There was nowhere to route any pipes or vents from the front air conditioning system to the back because under here is the drivetrain, transmission, etc. So AMG General's solution was you just set an air conditioning system here, send power to it, and then you cover it with this. Actually, this might be a luxury moment because the AMG General Hummer H1 has not one, but 2 air conditioning blowers. CB radio turns on, not wired in, probably for everyone's benefit, or I would just annoy truckers on the road, and we need them to focus on their job and not focus on running me off the road because I won't stop making jokes and asking them stupid questions. Down here you have the controls for the central tire inflation system, inflate and deflate. You can do the front wheels, the back wheels, or all of them at the same time. It feels cramped and spacious at the same time. I have the forward view of a new Camaro, this squinted, small windshield. But I couldn't hit my passenger in the face if I wanted to. I literally can't reach the passenger cup holder. If that door lock was stuck and they said, hey, can you reach over and get the door for me? No, I cannot, unless I have a rope and I lasso it or something like that and pull the door latch. It is so spacious, but so cramped. Spacious cargo box. I think the wagon's the one to get versus a soft top or the short bed pickup truck because this is quite a bit of cargo volume. And if you take this partition out, you could sleep 2 people long ways on a camping trip. An earlier owner also bolted in this toolbox right here, which I think is very clever. Now, funny enough, this truck comes with a seat that bolts in right here, and you can either make it face forwards or backwards. No one can really fit in that seat unless they're like 5 years old. So what I think you do is you have your kids face this way, and then as you're trying to get on the highway and accelerate to 60 miles per hour, which takes 20 seconds, they can hold up a sign that says, "We swear we're trying, please go around." We're going to transport a whole lot of freedom. There's always cool details when a vehicle was purpose-built for something, in this case, military first, civilian second. But just this way, this little nub here goes into this little hole and holds the doors open. I like it. I just like that stuff. Just ignore that. And I have to say, all the doors on this truck operate so well. They're very light, but they also close very definitively and very precisely. I wish the doors on my BMW sounded this like concise in their operation. Just click, click, that's it. It's not grrr. Another cool piece of technology is the spare tire carrier. This whole system is actually a pivoting jack that will allow you to lower it all the way to the ground. So if you pop a tire, you lower it to the ground so you don't have to lift this super heavy thing off the truck, and then you roll it over and you change the tire and you roll the flat one back over, bolt it on, and then you just jack it back up and swing the door closed. It also kind of works like a security system for the wagon compartment because the spare tire carrier drops into this notch and won't move out of the way. And if you don't know how to operate this, not getting in there. And I don't know how to operate it, so just gonna leave it open. The engine is kind of incredible. And I'm gonna stand on the tire, otherwise you can't see me. And it's all about me, isn't it? Look at it. It is actually a front mid-engine setup. The engine is absolutely set behind the front axle. Part of that is because the axle is so far forward, which helps it have that amazing, amazing approach angle. But also you'll notice the engine's really high. There's that huge hump on the interior. As you can see, the engine and the whole drivetrain are like higher in the vehicle than in basically anything else that's out there. So you have that flat bottom. A lot of cooling happening up here. I think I see 3 different forms of radiator. And of course there's a turbo hidden over there somewhere. One, shout out to the owner because this is a very nicely kept Hummer, but it does show signs of off-roading. That's what these are for. Do that with them. The Hummer and Humvee were built with 5 different engines. It started with a 5.7 liter gasoline V8, and at the end, in 2006, with the Alpha Hummer, they gave it a Duramax 6.6 liter, which is definitely the best engine. This civilian model has a 6.5 liter turbodiesel V8 built by GM and Detroit Diesel, and it's fitted to a 4-speed automatic transmission. Some of the earlier trucks had a 3-speed automatic transmission. It makes 195 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque, which is 100 more pound-feet than the non-turbocharged version. And you definitely want the turbocharger because this 6,700 pound tactical hamburger takes 20 seconds to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour. For reference, a new Civic Si has an engine that is 70% smaller than this one, and it makes more horsepower. That is as diesel a sound as you get. The owner and his friend are in the car right now, but they're so far away that we're just going to use CB radios to talk to each other. Steering is incredibly light. Yeah, one finger steering, like a Rolls Royce. This is really the Rolls Royce of military vehicles that have been turned into luxury cars. This sound is exactly why Americans wouldn't buy diesel passenger cars, because so many people's brains had just been wired and trained to think of big trucks and, oh, this is what diesel sounds, and it's just loud and clunky. And then Volkswagen, BMW, Audi, they can make the nicest diesel in the world. They got great gas mileage, except for the Dieselgate thing, and we still wouldn't buy them. So with the Bronco, you kind of sit here. You know, they have a lot of space with door and fender. That's where that track width comes from. So yes, while the tires are technically wider on the Bronco Raptor than on this thing, I'm right up against the door here. So I am as far left as I can get. I feel like I'm sitting on top of a Bronco fender. That's what it feels like. It's inboard brakes, pedals kind of soft. You got to go a little far into it, but I'm not expecting carbon ceramics on this thing. Driving this on the highway would be a loud experience. You don't have to worry about wind noise because you can't really go over 65 miles per hour for a long time, or the portal hubs will heat up. So you're just plodding along at 55 next to the U-Haul trucks and things like that. This is 30, but it feels like 80. It's so loud. I gotta say, on this road, the lanes are wide enough. If I just keep my left side near the left marker, the right is okay. I think it really highlights how big cars have gotten these days. When this came out, cars were smaller for the most part. But now, 30 years later almost, a Chevy HD 2500 ZR2 is only 4 inches narrower than this, but they weigh the same, and that truck is 6 feet longer almost. There are plenty of vehicles out and about that are almost the same footprint as this. This is one of the biggest, but not by as big a margin as it used to be. Gotta start slowing down early. We're like drive through a forest and like crash through all the trees and just, you know, punch through the other side. It's a 40-gallon tank, so even when it's like an eighth of a tank, it still has 5 gallons left, right? Yeah, that's the math. Eighth of a tank, it's 5 gallons. Let's see if we accelerate. Okay, let me correct that. If I press the gas pedal, it kind of tries to accelerate. It doesn't really go anywhere. Well, look, this was made for going a reasonable speed for a long amount of time, meaning a lot of miles, a lot of days, weeks, months, years in service. And they want to minimize how often they had to get repaired, you know, by the service members that were out, you know, in a conflict zone. And I'm sure these had to undergo some kind of surgery now and then, maintenance, whatever. And I have heard from soldiers that these were not the most comfortable things in the world to drive around in. But they were a massive leap from the Jeep. I mean, if you look at a Willys and look at one of these, which would you rather drive around in the desert? Well, the problem with the Hummer, or what became the problem, is that they kept adding more systems and more weight to them. And this was brought on by, you know, IEDs, so they needed to add more armor. And so when these came out, they were 6,500 pounds. But now, according to a lot of websites, the current Humvees, the military Humvees with armor and weapons, are 11 to 13,000 pounds. These have trouble beating a snail across an intersection. Now double the weight. So they're too slow, they're too heavy. After 30 years of service, the Humvee is slowly being retired, and a new bid went out to a bunch of contractors to try to make the new armored, you know, tactical vehicle. And Oshkosh, actually, the makers of heavy equipment, not the baby clothes, they won the contract to make what they call the, I think, JLTV, the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle. And it kind of looks like a 4-door Wrangler if it injected itself with a barrel of testosterone replacement therapy. So that is going to be the new Humvee. They're going to use this in some capacity until 2050. But that new Oshkosh vehicle is taking over. Funny enough, after a few years of building that new vehicle, Oshkosh lost the contract and AM General won it. So AM General is going to be building someone else's design. Huge props to the company that was given this big, challenging list of wants and needs from the military so long ago. And they came up with something that worked really well for 30 years. You know, 1,300 citizens in 1992 or 1993 decided to buy one to drive it around. If I owned a ranch, would I rather have this or a pickup truck like a 2020 F-150? I have no idea. This is definitely more entertaining, more unique, and the owner of this said it grabs more heads and more looks than any vehicle he's owned or been around, and I believe it. I live in Los Angeles. There are lots of people with fancy cars. You see Ferraris, Porsches, all the stereotypes are true. I see one of these maybe once a year. If you want to get attention or drive over a mountain, whether there's a road or not, this is a pretty good choice. As always, if you want to see more photos of this truck, read more details on it, or see the list of parts and information about the previous owners, click the link below and go to carsandbids.com. You can drive it anywhere except for a small garage.